You, the public, are the victims of phony money. And you, the public, can help prevent counterfeiting if you know your money.
Hey guys, it's SGT here. I have on the line the great G Edward Griffin. I wanted to preface this interview by letting you all know that I don't have enough time with Mr. Griffin to cover his entire incredible book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I want to cover just the brief highlights from that book so that folks who are new to this information can understand what it is we're up against in terms of this private banking cartel. And then I want to try to move into current events because things are unfolding negatively so darn quickly in this country, it's almost hard to keep up. Mr. Griffin, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, my pleasure, Sean. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, I know you're not that familiar with my channel, so I just want to give you a little background about the audience. The folks that watch my channel are folks that are familiar with your work and understand the way the Federal Reserve System works.
After the money is printed, it is placed in circulation by member banks of the Federal Reserve Bank. There are 12 Federal Reserve districts throughout the country.
This private banking cartel that's been in control since 1913 and is still in control now is really the root of all the evil we're facing right now, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I think so, because nothing happens in our world today without money, and you can buy an awful lot of mischief if you make the money. And that's basically what we're dealing with. The Federal Reserve System is a cartel of banks, as you pointed out so well, and these fellas are really in control of our system, of our economy, of our government itself. They're in control of the media, and they've literally been able to acquire control because of their ability to create money and control who gets it and at what interest rates and all that sort of thing. Money is the ultimate weapon and the ultimate lever of power. So, yes, everything that happens today can be traced certainly indirectly and in many cases directly to this banking cartel.
You know, one of the things that we've all learned as we've woken up to what's going on in the world is that sound money, real money, money that can't be inflated away, it's at the apex of where liberty and the Constitution meet, isn't it, sir?
Yes, I think it is. Mm-hmm. There's no question about it. Our founding fathers understood the role of money and the danger of giving the power of money creation to anybody, and certainly not their elected representatives. They wrote the Constitution in a way to prohibit the issuance of fiat money, meaning money without gold or silver backing, to prohibit the states from doing that, and by implication to prohibit the federal government from doing that. And so certainly they didn't want any private group of people to do it either. Philosophically, there's nothing wrong with a group of people who want to issue money based on nothing but credit. There's nothing wrong to allow people the freedom to create fiat money, as long as they don't force you to use it. See, that's the trick. People should be free to offer anything they want to as money, and you should be free to accept it or reject it. Under those conditions, fiat money won't survive. It never does, because why would anybody voluntarily accept money with nothing behind it except the promise of the issuer, who already has a bad reputation for breaking all the promises he ever made? So there's not much danger in that sector if you give people the freedom to do that, as long as you also give them the freedom to reject it. And our problem arises because when governments issue money, they don't give you the freedom to reject it. They pass legal tender laws, and they require you to accept that money in the payment of all debts, public and private, or else you go to jail. So often, as is the case, the issues really revolve down to questions of freedom to choose. And now that's where there's a bridge between the issue of money and the issue of all other aspects in our society that impinge upon our freedom. So, that's the crossover point.
Yeah, well, it's a moral issue, though, too, because in theory, having a fiat currency is not necessarily the end of the world if you have an honorable government and if you can trust your quote-unquote representatives. But that's not what we have in this country anymore. And I just want to quote this from Zero Hedge, in which Sanford's Brad Hintz explains why there will never be any justice in America. And I quote, "Goldman Sachs won't face criminal prosecution related to sales of mortgage-linked securities because such a move could threaten the U.S. financial system," end quote. And that's really all you need to know, isn't it?
It's quite obvious that these specialists, the mortgage bankers, play a leading part in the country's progress on the road to better living for us all.
Well, yeah, and your statement that we need an honorable government, well, that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as an honorable government. Never has been. Governments always deteriorate into criminal syndicates because their mission is to govern. And that may sound a little shocking to some people, but I came to the conclusion some time ago that our problem in the world stems pretty much on the idea that we have governments. That doesn't mean that I'm all for anarchy, but what I think we should have is what this country was originally, which was not a government. We don't realize it. We called it a government. In fact, I think that's one of the errors that our founding fathers made, is they said, what kind of a government are we going to have? And, well, there's only one kind of a government, and that's one that governs. And that, by definition, a government is to govern. And when you have a group of people who can govern another group of people, it ultimately degenerates into a criminal syndicate. What this country was in the beginning was a protectorate, a system in which the purpose of the state was to protect the lives, liberty, and property of its citizens, and nothing more. It was a protectorate, but they called it a government, and of course it eventually became that. It didn't take very long before the people that went to work for this protectorate decided they wanted to change it back into a government, which all of the other states in the world have always been. So when you said earlier that an honorable government, it would be okay if an honorable government issued a fiat currency, I had to laugh inside thinking there's no such thing as an honorable government. By nature, it's fraud.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So the nature of government is to be tyrannical, and that's why the founders tried to put in place so many protections to prevent the government from becoming tyrannical, to make sure that the government was by and for the people. That's why we have three branches of government. But these three branches of government do not seem to serve the people anymore, whether it's the federal Supreme Court infringing on the Fourth Amendment, as they recently have, and the state Supreme Court of Indiana pretty much destroying the Magna Carta in the Fourth Amendment, saying that police can enter your house for absolutely any reason or no reason at all, and no outrage from the people, no marching in the streets, and it just really pours salt in the wound at this point, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it does, and it's just because people think in terms of what we should have, they think it should be a government. Every time we use the word government, we need to sort of choke on it a little bit and say, is that what we really want? Do we want a limited government? See, there's another oxymoron. There's no such thing as a limited government. If you're going to govern, you're supposed to govern. How do you limit the power of government? To govern means to govern with no limit. And when you try and make a limited government, you're fighting against logic. So I think what we need to start doing is using the other word, which is protectorate. We need a protectorate. The United States is a protectorate, should be a protectorate. And that focuses on the purpose of the state, which is not to govern us, not to provide for us, not to take care of us, not to tell us what to do, but to protect ourselves, to protect our lives, liberty, and property. That's what they wrote the Constitution for. And if we focus on the word protectorate, that makes us use the right word. And we think, is this state protecting us or is it governing us? And it's a big bite, a mental bite for most people, because we've never been taught to think in terms of protecting versus governing. We always talk about, well, what's the government going to do? What should the government do? And we keep using the wrong word. And as long as we keep using that word, government, as though it's okay, we'll never come up with the right solutions.
Every worker in the country, farmers, bank presidents, streetcar conductors, dentists, teachers, clerks, mechanics, even unskilled laborers, work 3 months of every year to pay for what government spends.
It just seems that at every turn we're getting crushed by more tyrannical and authoritarian governmental regulation and action. It's as though they pulled out all the stops, and they literally there's no even pretense of a government for the people anymore.
No, they're running for the finish line as fast as they can now.
Yeah, and it's terrifying to those of us that are paying attention, because what is the end game for the people? I mean, at this point, what can people do?
There's nothing they can do as long as the state is in the hands of their enemy. I mean, it's just like saying to the inmates at a prison, "What can we do?" Well, you can't do anything as long as you're in the prison. and the prison guards are, in control. They have all the control over you, and you're in the cells. There's nothing you can do. Our only hope is to recapture the system.
This concludes part 1 of my interview with G Edward Griffin. Please click here for part 2.